Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving deep into, well, really the defining political movements of the mid-2020s, specifically looking at Generation Z.
Right.
And this isn't just about TikTok trends or, algorithms. This is about revolution. It's the age of the digital uprising, really.
Absolutely. And our mission today, as I see it from the sources, is to analyze this incredible, almost unbelievable success story in Nepal, the Gen Z revolution there.
Yeah, and contrast it sharply
Yeah.
with the resistance to that kind of movement right next door in India, a
Yeah.
nation that's, let's be honest, also plagued by systemic corruption.
And what jumps out immediately from the source material is this fundamental question. It's almost like political physics, isn't it?
How so?
Why do some systems, when they face this overwhelming popular dissent, just fracture violently, collapse in, under 48 hours in Nepal's case?
Right.
While others, equally burdened, deep-seated corruption, public frustration, they just seem impermeable. They seem to require this massive systemic re-engineering rather than just
Sure.
outright overthrow.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The ultimate test of state resilience. And the sources, they're absolutely clear on this. The answer lies in the nature of the confrontation.
The nature, meaning.
It's the difference between a government committing an undeniable, almost moral betrayal versus a system that just induces chronic, grinding frustration.
Betrayal versus frustration. That's a key distinction.
It seems to be the distinction, according to this analysis. But before we dig into that critical difference, we really need to establish who's driving this new era of political change. Who are we actually talking about here?
We're talking about Generation Z, Gen Z, born roughly, 1997 to 2012?
That's the cohort.
And this is the first truly globalized generation. I mean, they make up a huge demographic chunk, around 25% of the world's population.
A quarter of the world. Wow.
And crucially, they're digital natives. They see physical borders, digital borders, as porous, almost irrelevant sometimes.
And the research suggests they are the most politically primed group right now. Think about it. They grew up in the shadow of the 2008 financial crisis.
Right, the instability was baked in.
Exactly. They're acutely aware of the climate emergency. It's not abstract for them. And they inherited this economy defined by, well, precarious work, high debt, low opportunity structures.
And the sources really highlight the profound mental cost of inheriting all that.
Yeah.
It's staggering. Up to 40% of this generation report chronic stress.
40%.
Yeah. They came of age watching their parents struggle, often finding that, getting an advanced education doesn't guarantee stability anymore, not like it used to.
Especially now with AI accelerating white-collar job displacement, too.
Precisely. So this isn't just like low-level frustration. It's deeper. It's existential anxiety.
Right.
And it's being channeled through these incredibly powerful decentralized networks they command.
And that anxiety, that network power, it brings us right to the core paradox we're exploring. On one side, you have Nepal, a sitting government toppled in 2 days.
Just vanished.
A genuinely leaderless revolution, powered by memes, gaming chats, Discord, things that older generations might dismiss. And it fundamentally reshaped politics in Asia.
And then on the other side, you've got India, the continental giant, which the sources argue, quite bluntly, will not see a Gen Z revolution.
So different.
Completely different outcome predicted. And the central thesis, it hinges on that concept we just mentioned. Betrayal versus frustration.
Okay, lay that out again.
Nepal's youth revolted against a moral vacuum, an overt act of suppression, the social media ban that stripped away their digital rights, their voice. It felt like a deep betrayal.
Right. Personal?
Personal and fundamental. India, though, despite having massive systemic corruption, especially at lower bureaucratic levels, it possesses, according to the sources, a clean, very popular leader at the top.
Narendra Modi.
Exactly. And this leader effectively absorbs the public's moral outrage. He acts like a kind of political lightning rod.
Shielding the system.
Shielding the system from that final explosive Nepali-style collapse. That's the argument.
Yeah.
Your frustration is immense, but it doesn't target the very top in the same way. It doesn't feel like that ultimate betrayal.
Okay, so let's start where the system did explode. Let's go to Kathmandu, September 2025.
Case study 1, Nepal. The 48-hour digital revolution. And we really need to detail the immediate trigger because it was just so blatant.
The fuse. It was lit September 4th, 2025. The Nepalese government, boom, abruptly, completely banned 26 major social media platforms.
26, not just one or two.
No, the big ones. Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. Basically, the entire communication and increasingly commerce infrastructure for young people.
And the justification,
They tried to disguise it, claimed it was just about implementing a digital services tax.
which nobody bought.
Nobody,
Yeah.
especially the youth. It was seen universally as this transparent attempt to silence critics, to suppress the dissent that was already boiling over online.
And you have to remember the context. A country where nearly half the population, 48%, is active online. This digital space isn't a luxury.
No, it's essential. For work, for information, for staying connected with family working abroad.
That remittance connection is huge.
Huge. So cutting that lifeline, it was perceived as this fundamental act of betrayal by an elite that was already seen as morally bankrupt anyway.
And that sense of betrayal landed on a nation already suffering from deep, agonizing structural rot. The social media ban, yeah, it was the catalyst, the spark.
But the fuel was already there, years of decay, and we need to go beyond just the unemployment figures that they were bad.
Really bad. Over 20% of young adults jobless, despite high education rates.
But it's deeper than that, isn't it? The sources talk about this economy of absence.
Yes, this is crucial. Absolutely crucial to understanding the depth of the anger. A staggering 33%, one-third of Nepal's entire GDP relied on remittances.
Wait, say that again? 1/3 of the entire economy comes from people not being in the country.
Precisely. Money sent home by workers forced to migrate abroad because there were no opportunities at home.
That creates. What kind of society does that create?
A deeply fractured one. It means the generation grows up dependent on this global lifeline, often defined by separation from parents or siblings working overseas. The youth felt like they were being forced to leave their own country just to keep it afloat.
That dependency must breed more than just economic weakness.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Political apathy, a profound sense of national failure, resentment. It's all tied together.
And that whole situation was made completely intolerable by the stark, visible inequality that the internet itself provided.
Exactly. The contrast was just brutal. You have the average annual income for most Nepalists hovering around, what, $1,400?
$1,400 a year.
And then you see these viral videos circulating constantly of the Nepo babies, the kids of the politically connected elite.
Flaunting luxury cars, huge houses.
High roller trips to Dubai, all over Instagram and TikTok. The digital age turned abstract injustice, elite greed, into this concrete visual daily insult.
So, okay, the structure is rotten, the inequality is visible, the betrayal hits. When the digital ban came, the backlash was instant and highly coordinated. This is the Discord revolution part.
Right. And the government clearly miscalculated. They expected maybe to arrest a few ringleaders, shut it down. But there was no central leadership structure to decapitate.
It was entirely decentralized. How did that actually work on the ground?
Coordination ran through thousands of encrypted, overlapping networks, Discord servers, yeah, but also Telegram channels, even obscure gaming chats that were originally set up for, like, multiplayer strategy games.
Gaming chats? Seriously?
Seriously, anywhere encrypted and group-based, this was truly leaderless organizing in practice.
But there must have been some hubs, some coordination points.
Well, the sources do pinpoint one key civil society organization, Hami Nepal. They apparently served as a crucial sort of nerve center, hosting over 100,000 active members.
100,000.
Active members, coordinating logistics, getting supplies out, rapid response,
Yeah.
often anonymously. And they were reportedly using AI bots to filter incoming intel and relay instructions. It's like a decentralized command structure, but fluid.
And I want to pick up on the jargon they used because it says so much about how they operated securely. They called it fractal communication, these 11-11-11-11-11 networks. What does that even mean?
It sounds technical, but the concept is actually brilliant, kind of beautiful in a way. Think of a snowflake.
Okay.
It's complex, right? But every tiny branch operates under the same basic geometric rule. So in this context, an 11 network meant a group of 11 people who trusted each other implicitly.
Yep.
Total trust.
Just 11.
Just 11. Then, each person in that group was tasked with forming their own new 11-person group of trusted contacts.
Ah, so it spreads outwards exponentially.
Exactly. Rapid exponential spread. But here's the genius part for security.
Mm-hmm.
If the police managed to capture or infiltrate one 11 network,
It couldn't trace the whole thing.
precisely, they couldn't penetrate the entire network because there was no central hub, no hierarchy directly linking all these small groups together. It provided hyper-decentralization and, crucially, deniability.
That's incredible. It's like a distributed operating system for revolution. Wow. Okay, so let's trace the collapse, those 48 critical hours.
It kicked off September 8th. Massive protests erupted across Kathmandu, other major cities too. The scale just overwhelmed the initial police response.
And the state response.
They tried to regain control using live ammunition, which was a fatal mistake, politically and literally. 19 immediate deaths reported, 347 injuries just on that first day.
Jesus.
A nationwide curfew was imposed. The Home Minister resigned almost immediately, clearly sensing the way the wind was blowing. Total panic at the top.
But the curfew didn't work. The fractal networks kept going.
Completely ineffective. September 9th was the point of no return. The protesters, coordinated through those decentralized networks, successfully stormed 3 core symbols of state power almost simultaneously. Singha Durbar, the main government headquarters, the Supreme Court building,
Yeah.
and Buluwatar, the Prime Minister's official residence. They took them all.
Wow. Coordinated strikes on the centers of power.
And the collapse just cascaded into total chaos. Prime Minister K.P. Sharma Oli resigned under duress. But we have to pause here and acknowledge how severe the institutional failure was. This wasn't just a change of government.
No, what do you mean?
The sources detail a really serious breach of public order. 13,500 prisoners escaped.
Wait, 13,500?
From 3 major prisons, Kailali, Naku, Kanaski. State security had completely broken down. Guards fled. Systems failed.
That's anarchy.
It was bordering on it. The military had to step in just to close Triphuvan International Airport to prevent total pandemonium, people trying to flee, who knows what else. The sources emphasize the Nepalese state, in its existing form, simply ceased to function in those hours.
Okay, hang on. 13,000 prisoners escaping. Government buildings on fire. Yet the sources also suggest the protesters showed remarkable political maturity by nominating an interim leader. How do you square that? Doesn't the chaos just undermine their legitimacy instantly?
That's the absolute core tension here, isn't it? And the sources argue, look, the chaos was a side effect of the state collapsing under pressure, not the intent of the youth movement itself.
So they weren't trying to create anarchy.
Their argument is no. The youth were focused on seizing the political vacuum that opened up, not on just general destruction. And the subsequent nomination really proves this focus, they say.
How so?
Because they moved instantly amid that chaos to stabilize the situation. They nominated Sushila Karki,
Who was?
Nepal's first female Chief Justice, a deeply respected, nonpartisan figure.
That's a brilliant strategic move. Choosing a former Chief Justice. It immediately gives their revolution this veneer of legal continuity and moral weight, even amidst the smoke and escaped prisoners.
Exactly. It countered the narrative of pure mob rule. And by September 12th, Parliament was dissolved, and Karki was officially appointed as the first female interim prime minister, a stunningly rapid political reset.
And we absolutely cannot overlook the cultural element here, the thing that galvanized the movement and maybe maintained some coherence, the symbol they adopted.
Right. The de facto emblem became the Jolly Roger, but not just any Jolly Roger.
The flag of the Straw Hat Pirates from the manga and anime One Piece.
Which is globally massive, especially with Gen Z.
I find this absolutely fascinating. It's like it transforms a political revolution into a piece of shared global pop culture. It's cultural hybridity turned into a weapon. What did that flag actually mean to the protesters on the streets of Kathmandu?
It was a generational rallying cry, pure and simple. For Gen Z everywhere, the Straw Hats symbolize absolute resistance against tyranny, against corruption, against global greed. These are core themes of the story.
So it wasn't just a cool image.
Not at all. Graffiti started appearing across Kathmandu saying, "We are the Straw Hats, no one rules us." It instantly signaled that this fight wasn't just about, tax policy or specific ministers. It was about generational identity, about moral authority versus a corrupt, out-of-touch old elite.
And that signal was heard far beyond Nepal's borders. Nepal's success, that incredibly rapid success in September 2025, it immediately triggered what analysts quickly labeled the first digital spring.
Exactly. The digitally coordinated model, the leaderless structure, the use of these shared cultural symbols, it just rippled across 3 continents within weeks.
Which proves how interconnected Gen Z political consciousness really is now. This wasn't some unique, isolated local event.
No, it was more like Nepal perfected a networked global phenomenon. They created a digital playbook for decentralized uprising, and it got distributed worldwide instantly.
Let's look at the comparative table analysis the sources provide. It really shows the breadth of this contagion, how similar triggers were leading to similar outcomes using that Nepali model.
Okay, look at Madagascar. Late September 2025, just weeks after Nepal. Protests fueled by chronic power blackouts, extreme poverty, they erupted violently.
And the outcome.
This youth movement, calling themselves Gen Z Mada, forced the dissolution of the government. 22 deaths reported in the clashes. But crucially, the sources confirm. The one-piece flag, the straw hat Jolly Roger, appeared in Antananarivo's central square.
A direct link, an undeniable homage to the method and the symbol from Nepal.
Undeniable. Then you jump to Morocco, October 2025. The Gen Z 212 protests. Their focus was different outrage over the government's lavish spending for the 2030 World Cup bid.
While cutting essential services.
Exactly. Billions on vanity projects, they argued, while health and education budgets faced austerity. And again, youth leaders explicitly cited Nepal's mobilization playbook online, even after 3 protesters were killed. The model was spreading despite the risks, and the contagion hit South America too. Peru, also late September. Massive demonstrations demanding President Dina Boluarte resign over corruption allegations.
And the flag.
The Jolly Roger banner reappeared in Lima, another unmistakable echo. It showed the symbols were traveling just as fast as the tactics, crossing oceans instantly.
Back in Asia, the Philippines. September 2025 again. Protests there connected government corruption directly to climate crisis mismanagement.
How so?
They targeted graft specifically in flood control funds. The slogan that emerged was powerful: no green, no peace, tying transparency, climate justice, and political integrity all into one core demand. They saw corruption as enabling environmental disaster.
And we should acknowledge, this whole phenomenon didn't just spring out of nowhere in September 2025. It built on lessons learned.
From earlier movement.
Yeah, echoes of the Arab Spring movements maybe a decade prior, sure, but more recently you had Sri Lanka's uprising in 2022.
There, Goliath.
Exactly. Then Bangladesh saw major student protests in 2024, and Kenya had those huge anti-tax protests running through 2024 and into 2025. Nepal just provided the breakthrough, the successful, highly secure, decentralized organizing model that others could instantly grab and adapt.
So the common threads across these continents, they really define this digital spring. The analysts noted this persistent pattern, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You see, digital catalysts, often a specific ban or maybe a massive viral scandal igniting things.
Then the demographics. A medium protester age under 25, predominantly Gen Z.
Decentralized organization, that's key. Primarily via Discord, Telegram, secure channels, no single leader to arrest.
Shared culture. Using memes, anime references like One Piece, music as unifying forces.
And finally, those universal core demands. Jobs, transparency, climate justice, and crucially, digital freedom. They see online access as a fundamental right.
And that shared language, that collective consciousness, it culminated in this really striking symbolic moment recently in Georgia, didn't it?
Yeah, in Tbilisi. Youth demonstrators were filmed waving the Nepali national flag outside the presidential palace.
Not the one-piece flag this time, but the actual flag of Nepal.
The actual flag. They were explicitly using it as a protest emblem.
So they weren't just waving a random banner, they were making a very specific geopolitical statement.
Absolutely. They were linking their local struggle against corruption and what they saw as unrepresentative government directly to Nepal's success story. They were essentially declaring, look, our government has put itself into the same category as the one that fell in Kathmandu.
That's the power of a networked uprising, isn't it? This global Gen Z collective consciousness sharing tactics, language, symbols in real time.
It is. And that collective consciousness, that power, it forces us to pivot. If Gen Z anger is so global, and if corruption and economic precarity are pretty much universal problems, why is India, the giant next door, why is it considered immune by these sources?
Right. This brings us squarely to case study 2. India's corruption paradox. The sources argue, very explicitly, India will not see a Nepal-style Gen Z revolution. And the key distinction lies not in the existence of corruption because everyone agrees it's rampant.
Oh yeah, it's endemic.
But in its strategic location within the political structure, where the perceived rot sits.
And the core argument, boiling it down, is that India has an honest, personally popular leader at the helm. And that leader provides the essential moral cover that Nepal's government completely lacked.
A shield.
A shield. A figure who prevents that critical spark of betrayal from igniting the whole thing the way it did in Nepal.
Okay, let's delve into that aspect, the integrity of the leadership. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he has successfully cultivated and maintained this personal reputation for incorruptibility. And the sources stress this isn't just clever PR. They cite concrete examples.
Yes, like the detail, widely reported, that he apparently does not claim his official salary as prime minister.
Which is an incredibly powerful moral signal in a country where graft, especially among politicians, has often been quite overt. The message is clear. He's serving, not personally profiting.
And there's that anecdote from his time before becoming PM when he was chief minister of Gujarat.
Hmm.
It's highly revealing.
What happened?
Apparently, throughout his entire tenure as chief minister, his official state salary just quietly accumulated, untouched, in a government account.
He never drew it.
Never drew it. And when he left Gujarat for Delhi to become prime minister, that substantial sum was formally converted into a financial trust, dedicated solely to supporting the education of the children of his own administrative staff, the clerks, the peons, the drivers.
Wow. That's almost a textbook example of leading by moral example, setting a standard.
It is. And that image of personal virtue contrasts so sharply with the administration before him, the Congress-led UPA government under Prime Minister Manmohan Singh.
Singh himself was often seen as personally honest.
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
Personally honest. But his cabinet, his government, was absolutely paralyzed by massive corruption scandals. Huge ones. The 2G spectrum allocation scam, Colgate, the coal block allocation scam, the Commonwealth Games fiasco.
Billions and billions implicated.
Billions. These massive elite corruption scandals just eroded public trust. Not just in the Congress Party, but arguably in the entire political class at the time. Modi, by contrast, when he came in, made intolerance for cabinet-level corruption his immediate primary hallmark. Ministers were dropped for even hints of impropriety.
Okay, so the argument is, if the leader at the very top is seen as personally clean and remains popular, then the collective rage that comes from systemic corruption, which is still immense.
Undeniably immense.
It just can't crystallize into that unifying revolutionary movement targeting the head of state. The youth are profoundly frustrated, yes, by the rot in the bureaucracy and the state governments, the lower tiers, but they don't feel fundamentally betrayed by the man at the top.
That's the crucial distinction the sources make. Gen Z's frustration in India, they argue, gets channeled differently. It becomes demands for reform, demands that the clean leader fix the dirty system below him.
Rather than demanding the whole system be burned down, which is what happens when the top leadership itself is seen as the source of the rot, like in Nepal.
Exactly. The anger has a different target, a different outlet.
However, this leads us to the really vital lesson that the India case study teaches. Clean, popular leadership is absolutely not the same thing as a clean system.
Not even close.
Modi's personal virtue might be undeniable, according to these sources, but corruption persists because it's deeply structural. It lives in the plumbing of the state.
Right. It's in the bureaucracy. It's tangled up in the complexities of India's federal system, the division of powers between Delhi and the states, and it's just the sheer scale of the country.
Scale matters.
Hugely. Unlike Nepal, which is smaller, more centralized, a unitary state where corruption felt more concentrated and obvious at the top, India's systemic rot is. It's decentralized. It's fragmented across dozens of states, thousands of government departments, millions of civil servants.
So it's harder to target.
Much harder to target a single unifying symbol of betrayal when the corruption feels like it's everywhere and nowhere all at once. It's diffuse.
And the sources point to demonetization as proof of how hard it is to fix this structurally.
Yes, demonetization back in 2016. That was Modi's genuine, massive national experiment. A truly radical move, withdrawing large currency notes overnight, trying to root out black money, disrupt informal graft networks. He spent tremendous political capital on it.
And the result?
Well, it was hugely controversial, disruptive. But its main lesson, according to this analysis, was just how deeply embedded the problem is. Even a shock treatment of that magnitude couldn't eradicate the systemic graft mechanisms.
It proved corruption is just interwoven with India's social and financial fabric.
Exactly. It's not like a single disease you can cure with one strong medicine. It's more like a pervasive, highly resilient bacterial culture living within the system.
And to really drive home the depth of this problem, the sources draw an analogy,
Yeah.
a powerful one, to China.
Right. The argument goes, if having extremely strong laws, brutal enforcement mechanisms, and a leader obsessed with fighting corruption could eliminate it, then China should be corruption-free by now.
Because they have all of that. Centralized power, President Xi Jinping's decades-long, genuinely zero-tolerance anti-corruption crusades.
Which have netted incredibly high-profile figures. Tigers and flies, as they say.
Yeah.
Yet Xi's crusade has to continue, year after year after year. Which proves the point. Enforcement and punitive measures alone, even the most draconian, are insufficient. The problem is structural. You cannot simply arrest your way out of systemic failure.
Which brings us back to the conclusion for India.
That India doesn't need a fiery revolution like Nepal's uprising against outright tyranny and betrayal. It needs something perhaps harder, more intellectual, more profound. Systemic reengineering, a fundamental redesign.
And this transition, this need for systemic reengineering, it leads us perfectly to the alternative model, the one that was apparently ready and waiting in Nepal, the model that India perhaps could potentially adopt to clean its own dirty system without needing that violent collapse.
Yes, we need to introduce the Calcust model.
Caucus.
Calcust. This is where we uncover the sort of hidden intellectual architects behind Nepal's potential success, according to the sources. We're talking about a Kathmandu-based think tank, the Kalkism Research Center, or KRC.
And they are.
The sources identify this small, but apparently very potent, center as the origin of what they call the world's only working blueprint for a corruption-free country.
That's a huge claim. A working blueprint.
It's a bold claim. But they detail that around 50 leading Nepali economists and intellectuals collaborated to develop this comprehensive framework over several years.
And crucially, this wasn't just some academic paper gathering dust on a shelf.
No, that's the key point. They didn't just publish it. They actively trained tens of thousands of college students across Nepal on these specific principles. Principles of corruption-free governance, economic justice, systemic design.
So they were laying the intellectual groundwork.
Exactly. This silent groundwork is presented as the key connection. While Gen Z was organizing the destruction of the old corrupt system using Discord and those fractal networks, the KRC had already provided a detailed conceptual framework for the reconstruction.
So when the revolution actually happened, the protesters, or at least the emerging leadership, had a ready-made blueprint for what should come next. It wasn't just chaos.
That seems to be the argument.
Yeah.
It allowed for that incredibly swift transition to an interim government that was already focused on implementing deep reforms based on this pre-existing model.
Okay, so what is the Calcust model? What does this blueprint actually propose? It rests on 3 pillars, right? All focused on finance.
Yes, 3 radical, highly specific pillars. And they all focus on fundamentally re-architecting the financial relationship between the individual citizen and the state. It's about changing the plumbing of money itself.
Pillar 1.
A fully cashless economy. Simple concept, profound implications. The KRC argues physical cash is the primary lubricant for corruption.
Because it's untraceable.
Completely untraceable. Bribes, black money, shadow economies, they thrive on cash. So the idea is eliminate physical cash entirely. Make every single transaction, from buying street food to a major political donation, digital.
Which means it's traceable, auditable, transparent.
Instantly, every single rupee becomes accountable within the system.
But hold on. How does that stop low-level corruption completely? If a bureaucrat still wants a bribe, couldn't they just demand a digital transfer instead? To a relative's account or something?
They could try. But that transaction would still be logged. It would be digitally recorded, time-stamped, and potentially flagged by the state's financial oversight systems, especially if it looks suspicious, unusual amounts, patterns, connections.
So it increases the risk for the corrupt official?
Dramatically. Corruption thrives on invisibility, on deniability. By making every single rupee flow digitally and accountably, the act of demanding or receiving a bribe shifts from being an easy, invisible crime to a highly risky, visible one. It creates a permanent digital trail. The goal is to fundamentally remove the environment where petty bribery and shadow economies can flourish undetected.
Okay, that makes sense. It changes the risk calculus. What's Pillar 2?
Pillar 2 is equally radical. State ownership of all banks.
All of them. Private banks gone.
That's the proposal. Centralization of all financial flows under a public treasury or a system of state-owned banks.
Why? What does that achieve?
2 main things, according to the KRC model. First, it ensures that every single rupee circulating in the economy is truly accountable to the public system. It aims to eliminate the hidden channels, the political cronyism, the regulatory capture, and the massive leakages that often plague private banking sectors, especially in developing economies. Full transparency from the banks themselves.
And the second function?
Perhaps more importantly, it means the profits generated from lending the interest collected, the fees returned directly to the public purse, to the state treasury.
Instead of enriching private shareholders or politically connected elites.
Exactly. It eliminates the classic problem of privatizing financial gains while socializing the risks and losses when things go bad. The financial system becomes a public utility, essentially.
But wait a minute, if all the banks are state-owned, what about capital flight? If wealthy Nepalese or foreign investors suddenly decide they don't want their savings handled by a state entity, especially one potentially operating under new rules like Pillar 3, wouldn't they just move their money out? To Dubai, Singapore, London, overnight?
That is absolutely the principal risk, a huge risk. And the KRC blueprint apparently addresses this directly. The transition has to be rapid, decisive, and robustly implemented. And crucially, it must be paired with aggressive, temporary capital controls
Stop the money leaving.
to stabilize the domestic currency and prevent a catastrophic outflow during that initial volatile transition period. Furthermore, they argue that Pillar 3 itself, the most radical part, fundamentally changes the economic landscape in a way that might actually make capital flight less attractive over the medium term.
Okay, let's get to Pillar 3 then. The truly unprecedented element, you said.
Zero interest rates.
Zero. How does that even work?
By operating public state-owned banks, the model proposes that loans could and should be issued at 0% interest. 0%.
That fundamentally challenges the core assumption of, well, all modern capitalism, doesn't it?
Completely. The stated goal is to remove the profit motive entirely from the act of lending money. The KRC argues that interest, the charging of interest, inherently creates unnecessary speculation, it encourages financial predation, and it drives systemic inequality.
So remove interest, and what happens?
The cost of capital effectively drops to zero. This, they argue, unlocks unprecedented liquidity for productive domestic use, starting businesses, funding education, building houses, all without the perpetual drag of compounding debt service payments. Money becomes a tool for development, not just an instrument for extraction.
But hang on, in traditional economics, interest rates aren't just about profit. They serve a purpose, right? They act as a price signal, allocating scarce capital to its most efficient uses, managing risk. If loans are essentially free, what's the incentive for anyone to innovate? And how do you decide who gets the money? Wouldn't everyone just take out massive free loans?
That's the critical question of allocation. And that's where the state ownership part comes back in. The allocation isn't left to market whims or pure profit seeking. It's managed by the state banking system, guided by national development priorities.
So the state decides who gets the zero interest loans based on what?
Based on prioritizing productive investments and socially beneficial projects, rather than just maximizing short-term financial return for the lender. Things like green energy, infrastructure, small business creation, affordable housing. They get priority. The incentive structure shifts from maximizing interest profit for the bank to maximizing social utility and long-term economic contribution for the nation.
And what about risk? Doesn't zero interest encourage reckless borrowing?
The KRC model actually argues the opposite in a way. They suggest risk-taking, particularly for entrepreneurs, is encouraged because the cost of failure is dramatically lower. If your business fails, you're not buried under mountains of compounding interest debt for decades. You might lose the principal, but the debt doesn't spiral out of control. The key, of course, is strict oversight by the state banks to ensure the loans are actually used productively for their stated purpose and not just, say, siphoned off or converted into foreign currency reserves abroad.
Okay, so cashless economy, state banks, zero interest. That's a massive structural change. And this creates what the sources call the double whammy.
Exactly. It's the profound byproduct. By eliminating the massive financial leakages from corruption and getting rid of the systemic drain of interest payments flowing out of the productive economy, you free up immense public resources, vast sums of money.
That were previously lost or misallocated.
Correct. And the KRC calculated or projected that the resources liberated just by this financial overhaul, by cleaning the system and stopping the interest drain, would be sufficient to immediately fund comprehensive universal welfare programs.
Immediately. What kind of programs?
We're talking about free, high-quality education at all levels, primary, secondary, university, universal health care for every citizen, and even universal legal services, making access to justice a basic right, not dependent on wealth.
So the transparency, the anti-corruption measures, they aren't just about good governance. They actually pay for the welfare state.
Precisely. It transforms corruption control from being just a cost center, a drain on resources for enforcement, into a massive development engine. Plugging the leaks generates the revenue.
And this model, this ability to fund things internally, it fundamentally addresses that social decay we talked about earlier in Nepal, the economy of absence.
Directly, because the Kalkis model enables something truly transformative. A job guarantee for every Nepali inside Nepal.
A job guarantee for everyone.
By redirecting those freed up resources and using the state financial system to strategically invest in job-creating sectors, domestically infrastructure, green tech, social care, education, arts. The goal is to ensure there is dignified work available for every citizen within Nepal.
So it eliminates the necessity of mass migration for work.
That's the core aim. to transform Nepal from being a labor-exporting nation trapped in that economy of absence into a talent-retaining nation, to ensure young people, educated people, can build their future, use their skills at home.
That is potentially revolutionary for a country like Nepal, and their approach to gender equality is also described as radical.
Extremely radical and possibly unique globally. They propose institutionalizing gender equality by formally recognizing and crucially compensating women's unpaid household labor.
Compensating housework, how?
Recognizing the essential work caring for children, caring for the sick, caring for the elderly, managing the household is a full state-backed economic contribution, potentially through direct stipends or social credits integrated into the system.
That would be groundbreaking. It tackles the massive gender bias in how we measure economies worldwide.
Absolutely. Traditional GDP calculations basically ignore trillions of dollars worth of essential domestic labor, simply because it's unpaid and usually done by women. By formally compensating this work, Nepal wouldn't just boost its internal economy and women's economic power. It would arguably become the first nation to formally dismantle the artificial economic distinction between formal work and domestic work, a huge step for gender equity.
Okay, so this job guarantee model, combined with recognizing unpaid labor, it isn't just a domestic policy for Nepal, is it? The sources argue it has huge global implications. It serves as the Global South's potential antidote to that rising tide of anti-immigration sentiment in the West.
Absolutely. It hits right at the heart of the migration debate. When you look at the global context, for nations like Nepal with that staggering 33% remittance dependency migration, hasn't really been a choice for decades. It's been an economic necessity. People had to leave.
But the Calquist model flips that logic.
Completely. It aims to make migration a genuine choice again, not an act of economic survival. If you can find dignified work, healthcare, education, and opportunity at home, the pressure to leave diminishes dramatically.
And if Nepal or any country actually succeeds in implementing this, it profoundly challenges that whole Western narrative, doesn't it? The narrative that prosperity for the Global South somehow depends on exporting its labor to the West or the Gulf.
It really does. It establishes a potentially viable model for what the sources call post-dependency economics, a template for other countries facing similar challenges. Think the Philippines, Bangladesh, maybe nations in Central America, all heavily reliant on remittances and plagued by corruption to achieve stability and prosperity by focusing resources and talent inward, not outward.
And how does that counter anti-immigration politics specifically?
Well, the anti-immigration narrative in the West often thrives on economic fear, right? They're coming here to take our jobs, or they're a drain on our welfare systems.
That's the rhetoric, yes.
But if nations can actually guarantee dignified work and opportunity at home, if their systems become clean and functional enough to provide for their own citizens, then that entire political argument starts to collapse. The pressure on global borders, driven by economic desperation, eases. Global relationships could potentially shift back towards genuine partnership, knowledge exchange, cultural exchange, away from managing flows of desperate people.
Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground. We've seen the incredible speed of change in Nepal, 48 hours to topple a government, fueled by that deep sense of betrayal over the digital crackdown.
Yeah, the digital spring's first major victory.
We've explored the profound political, maybe even philosophical difference that protects India, according to these sources, the clean, popular leader absorbing the rage generated by systemic frustration, preventing that final explosion.
The lightning rod effect.
And we've detailed this alternative system, Calquism, apparently waiting in the wings in Nepal, this radical blueprint for systemic reengineering, ready to govern the post-revolution state, focusing on financial architecture to eliminate corruption and fund welfare.
And it's fascinating that the comparison drawn in the material is to the French Revolution. That's how historically significant they see this moment.
How so?
The French Revolution fundamentally shifted sovereignty, replacing the divine right of kings with the power of citizens. Nepal's revolution and the Calquist model seeks a similar fundamental shift, replacing systemic corruption with institutional integrity and replacing financial dependency with national dignity and self-sufficiency.
And the core similarity.
It remains that fundamental political truth. When ordinary people, especially a unified, networked, digital generation like Gen Z, act together with a clear purpose, history can bend towards justice. Power structures can be reshaped.
So for India, the challenge laid out is starkly different from Nepal's path. It's not about burning down the system.
No. The challenge is to channel that massive Gen Z energy, that frustration, into reforming institutions from within. or pressuring for reform from the top down. To achieve that purity of governance that India clearly desires, it needs to adopt structural, systemic change, perhaps something like the Kalkist framework, adapted to its own context to complement its popular clean leadership.
Because a clean leader can start the journey, point the way.
But only deep structural reengineering, changing the rules of the game, can possibly lead to the destination. A truly corruption-free, prosperous, and globally competitive nation. Personality isn't enough to clean the system.
And this brings us to the final thought. The world, especially the West, once looked at these developing nations, particularly those exporting lots of labor, and rhetorically asked, what happens when migration doors close? What happens when we restrict immigration?
It was a question often posed with a sense of impending crisis.
But the Gen Z movements of the Digital Spring in Nepal, Madagascar, elsewhere, they've provided a powerful, unexpected answer to that question.
And what is that answer?
The answer isn't rejection. It's not building higher walls. The answer is regeneration, fixing the systems at home. If Nepal, against all odds, actually becomes the first truly post-corruption nation built on this audacious Kalkist blueprint, its legacy will be proving a new global truth for the 21st century.
Which is?
No one must leave home to live with dignity.